Hi everyone, this is English 241 Early American Lit, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Age of Reason. So the Age of Reason begins in the 18th century. It is a time when people are moving away from religion and superstition of the Middle Ages, and they're starting to think about themselves and how they connect to the universe. And to knowledge. And so another term for Age of Reason is the Enlightenment. That's really what they called it in Europe, and in America we called it the Age of Reason. And up until this time, man has used God as the justification for understanding who he is, how he should live his life, and what he should do. And so the Age of Reason is the beginning of an open society where people are free or encouraged to pursue individual happiness and individual freedoms. It's also politically and social concepts of the medieval world are abandoned, so we no longer are looking at the fief system or serfdom. We're moving away from that. We're moving into, certainly in the Americas, we don't have that kind of system in place. And again, the Age of Reason, it's inside the Age of Enlightenment. It's a part of that, but in Europe they called it the Age of Enlightenment. In the United States it was the Age of Reason. Of course, it wasn't the United States, it was just America at this time. And so this is a time that's really exciting. There's lots of new ideas, lots of ways to think about the world without fear of being murdered or tortured. If you remember, in the Middle Ages, we had the Crusades and periods where people were brutalized if they disagreed with any of the religious leaders. We had that certainly in the Americas as well with the Puritans and the Pilgrims, but much less so now that we have the Age of Reason, or now that we've come to the Age of Reason. And so the Age of Reason, some of the elements that make it the Age of Reason is man now feels obligated to follow his own intellect and not revealed truth. And the revealed truth is that truth that is revealed through the Bible or through clergy. So we're moving away from that as being the only way of understanding who we are and our purpose. We start looking at nature and the earth. We look at miracles and prophecy and religious rites are considered to be superstitious. So they're really not as highly respected as science and nature and those things that are much more easily touchable, I guess, for lack of a better term, but more concrete. So reason, philosophically, is defined as the ability to form and operate upon concepts in abstraction, narrowing information to bear its content without emotion. So you're thinking of these big ideas, but what you are doing is you are using logic and reason to try to understand them, and it's not emotional, it's not how you feel, it's what you can show, what you can prove. So we're really beginning to respect scientific theory and to begin to rely on it more. So one of our first people that you're going to be reading is Elizabeth Ashbridge. And she was born in 1713 and died in 1755. She was born in England and eloped at the age of 14 with her husband, and he died within a few months of their elopement. Her parents then banished her from home, so she kind of wandered around. She went to Ireland and tried on a few religions there, and eventually she emigrated to America at the age of 19 as an indentured servant. She tried various religions in Ireland. She was a Baptist, a Presbyterian, and a Catholic, and she really wanted to become a minister, but the leaders of these churches would not allow her to. So when she goes to the United States, or to America, sorry, I keep saying the United States. When she goes to America, she's visiting some relations, I believe they're cousins in Pennsylvania, and she was introduced to the Quaker philosophy, and quickly she became convinced. So religion made her more focused and dedicated, but it also alienated her from her second husband, who enjoyed her sense of humor and adventuresome spirit. So I'm not sure what happens to him. He must have died, but or maybe he divorced her. I can't remember. Anyway, we're on to third husband, Aaron Ashbridge, and he was a Quaker. So when she married him, she was able to be a Quaker and to really live her life the way that she wanted to be. And what you're reading are some account of the forepart of the life of Elizabeth Ashbridge, written by her own hand many years ago. And it was published in 755, which, as you recall, is when she died. So that's Elizabeth. Elizabeth brings us to kind of our understanding of Quakers. And Quakers were formed in 1647 by George Fox in England. And he was born in England to a strict Puritan family. But at 19, he left to find the truth. He married his wealthy supporter's widow, Margaret Fell, in a marriage of equals. And throughout his life, he was frequently persecuted and imprisoned. He spent his life expanding and organizing the Quaker movement. And Quaker beliefs are important because you'll see as we go through them that a lot of these beliefs are integral to what we consider American beliefs. Of course, the first one is very different from the Puritans, and this is why Fox was kicked out by his family, because this is very anti-Puritan, and that is that every man and woman, notice that we got women in there, this is the first time, has direct access to God. We don't need clergy, we don't need ministers, we don't even need churches. We just need a quiet place to worship. That's what Quakers believe. And that every person, male or female, free or slave, is of equal worth. So this is a huge shift. This isn't, we don't have the special people who are already marked for God. We have every person is of equal value. Every person, there's no need for redemption. We just need to be good people. The Quakers, again, they don't believe in elaborate ceremonies or rituals or grounds or any of those other kind of symbolic forms of religion. And so you can see how this is really the birth of the Age of Reason, because we're moving away from those symbols and rituals of religion and more to a reasoned understanding. And so finally, one of the other things that Quakers believe is that it's important to follow your inner spiritual understanding in order to have growth. And so that's really where the concepts of religious tolerance begins. John Woolman is a well-known Quaker and abolitionist. He was, I think, really important, and we'll go through why I think that and why you're reading about him. But he is a well-known Quaker. He was born in Burlington, New Jersey, to a Quaker family, so he is true blue American. He's not like Ashbridge. He doesn't emigrate from England. He was born here and raised here. He was schooled alongside of Native Americans. And I like this fact about him because I think it's interesting. He was known for wearing primarily white clothes because slaves made the dyed fabric, and he was certainly anti-slavery with every core of his being. He fought against slavery within the Quaker belief or faith. He traveled up and down the East Coast and observed slavery firsthand in Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina. And when he would arrive at someone's home to visit them, and their slaves would help him with his bags or serve him food, he wanted to pay the slaves. And this really angered the slave owners, because obviously they owned the slaves and they didn't want the slaves to get any money of their own. He refused to purchase any slave-made goods. He preached against the cruelty to animals, economic injustice, oppression, conscription, and slavery. So he really was quite ahead of his time, and his beliefs, you can see, are really what we would consider today probably liberal American beliefs. He wrote some considerations on keeping the Negroes in 1754. He uses verses from the Bible to support his argument for why we should not have slavery. And he believes it his duty to make enlightened Christians reconsider slavery. He believes that all nations are under one blood, that we are all interrelated and interconnected. We are the same species, yet we are in the higher station and enjoy greater favors. So that's a huge shift in understanding of who slaves were, who Native Americans are, to understand that they are the same as ourselves. That's really different. And so because we caused the slaves to be there, to be in America, we are responsible for their well-being. So he believed very strongly that it was our moral responsibility to care for the slaves and to make sure that they were released from their bonds. He was completely anti-slavery. So next we move on to Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin had a nice long life. Many sayings that we have in our life can be traced to Benjamin Franklin. And one of your assignments is to look at, I think it's like a 1.5 minute little video which lists a bunch of his different sayings. And if you can't find a saying there that you really want to write about, you can certainly pick one, go online and search for Ben Franklin quotes and see what you find, to see if you find something there that you prefer better. But he's given us honesty is the best policy, a penny saved is a penny earned, and God helps them that help themselves. And these are all, again, fundamental principles that we believe in America. We believe we should save money. We believe that honesty is the best policy. I bet you've been told that at some point in your life. And I bet you have been told that God helps those that help themselves. Again, this is very different belief from the Puritans, and it's really kind of starting to shape those fundamental American principles that we still incorporate in our daily living today. So Franklin is important for several reasons. He represents the American dream of the poor boy who makes good. He was born in Boston. He was the 15th child of a poor candle maker. And he was sent to live with his older brother, who was a Boston printer, where he studied printing. He published his first work at age 12, 2 ballads on the drowning of a lighthouse keeper and on the capture of Blackbeard the pirate. And by the time he was 16, he was writing for his brother's newspaper using the pen name Silence Dogood. And he made satirical comments on Boston society, politics, and religion. At the age of 17, he ran off to Philadelphia, where he became an independent printer on his own. By 1732, he was using the name Richard Saunders, and he published Poor Richard's Almanac, which is a calendar filled with advertisements, weather forecasts, recipes, jokes, and a swarm of proverbs that are still popular today, like those I introduced you to when I began talking about Franklin. He retired from business at 42, wealthy and famous, to focus his energies on science and public service. So between 57 and 75, he represented the colonies in England, where his propagandizing caused the irritated British government to call him the inventor and first planner of colonial discord. So he was really a thorn in the British side because he was calling for independence, explaining what was wrong with being governed by the king. When he returned to Philadelphia, he was named a delegate to the Second Continental Congress and a member of the committee chosen to write the Declaration of Independence. In 1776, Congress sent him once again to Europe as minister to France to seek aid for the faltering revolution. And he is given a great deal of credit for helping France or for getting France to join the war against England. And 5 years after he signed the peace treaty that confirmed the American victory in the Revolution and established the nation's independence. So in many ways, he is a very important founding father of our country. When he returned to America for the last time, he was named a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and that is where he spent the last days of his life. So he really contributed first to literature, but to the Age of Reason significantly, but with the onset of the printing press and having that Richard's Almanac be kind of popular reading. We didn't have magazines at the time, but we had Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, which was a way for people to connect and have fun and enjoy reading in a very non-threatening, casual kind of American way. So he's a primary figure in the rise of American pragmatism. He focuses on self-reliance, and so he's really on the forefront of Emersonian transcendentalism, which we will talk about when we look at our fiction section in early American literature. He was a prolific writer. He wrote for journals, magazines, newspapers. He did lots of satire, political journalism. He had a very simple utilitarian writing style. He didn't use all the fancy, fluffy words that we've seen in our Puritans, we've seen in our Quakers up till now. He is considered the greatest literary artist of the 18th century in America, and he's credited for creating America's first great book, that first idea of what a great book is. So next we go to Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine lived from 1737 to 1809, and he is famous for saying, "Those who want to reap the benefits of this great nation must bear the fatigue of supporting that." So in other words, if you want to enjoy your independence, enjoy your freedoms, enjoy your rights to individualism and to democracy, you have to work to support that. It's just not given to you, that you have to take responsibility for it. So Paine is a transplant, an emigration. He emigrated in 1774. He came as a poor Englishman who was just really a bad businessman. He did not do well in England. And 2 years later, after coming to America, he was one of the most famous and powerful voices of the Revolution. Ben Franklin is credited with encouraging Paine to come to the United States because he came shortly after meeting Ben Franklin in London. He wrote for the newly established Pennsylvania Magazine, and he was motivated by the ideas of revolution that surrounded him, and by this motivation caused him to write Common Sense in January of 1776. After the Revolution, Paine devoted himself to designing radically new single-span iron bridges. In 1787, he sailed to Europe in search of financial backers. While in France, he witnessed the early events of the French Revolution. So in England, Paine read Edmund Burke's reflection on the French Revolution and then began to write a reply. Burke had defended the institution of monarchy and condemned revolutions that would displace legal kings, i.e., the American Revolution. Paine's answer, The Rights of Man, defended revolution and insisted that man was bound to no hereditary rulers. So in other words, he is writing against the divine right of kings. He is saying that you are not born to be a leader, that it's not who your father was or your grandfather, it's what you can do and how you can add to your country, support your country. His book, Common Sense, helped to inspire the Declaration of Independence. And during the most difficult times of the Revolution, after Washington's defeat in New York and his desperate retreat across New Jersey towards Philadelphia, Paine begins to publish his crisis papers. Washington's had crisis read aloud to his soldiers before they crossed the Delaware to defeat the Hessians at Trenton. And then 15 more crisis papers appeared over the next 7 years. From 1994 to 96, I'm sorry, I said 1794 to 1796, Paine completed The Age of Reason. And this is an attack on the irrationality of religion, and it's a forceful statement of the doctrines of deism, believing in God, but not necessarily having to have a formal sense of religion. And what he advocated was for reason, logic and reason, rather than a reliance on divine revelation as the proper guide for man. So it raised a lot of controversy, obviously, because again, this is a shift. We're talking about the age of reason now. And we're moving away from the ministers and the clergy being the leaders in the community and the people that are morally and economically responsible for the community. We're moving more towards a sense of traditional politicians. He was definitely vilified in the pulpits and journals, and you can understand this. Of course, ministers, clergy are not going to want to support these beliefs because it threatens their sense of power and their sense of identity and who they are in the community. So when he died in 1809, he wanted to be married in a Quaker cemetery, but was refused, and he was buried on his farm in New Rochelle, New York. 10 years later, his remains were exhumed and taken to England, where they were lost. So the final resting place of America's greatest, I won't say first, but certainly most, I dare say most important, one of the most important propagandists for revolution is unknown. He's lost to us. We don't know where he is. So next we have de Crevecoeur. It's Hector St. John de Crevecoeur, or de Crevecoeur, I should say it with a French accent. And the quote that we start off with him is, what then is an American? This new man. He is neither European or the descendant of an European. Hence that strange mixture of blood, which you will find in no other country. I could point out to you a man whose grandfather was an Englishman, whose wife was Dutch, whose son married a French woman, and whose present 4 sons have now 4 wives of different nations. So what de Crevecoeur is bringing to us is this understanding of America as a melting pot, that we are no longer European, we are no longer English, we are no longer French, we are no longer Dutch. We are a combination or a mixture of European descent. De Crevecoeur was born in Normandy in 1735, and at the age of 19 he sailed to America. In 1755 he went to Canada and enlisted in the Canadian militia and served as a government surveyor and cartographer. He bought land in Orange County, New York in 1769, and the American Revolution, along with his Tory sympathies, made him decide to return to France. So he really wasn't pro or anti-king like we've seen with other, Paine, for example, or Franklin. However, when he was trying to leave the United States, the British held him in the port of New York, saying that he was a rebel spy. So he wanted to go back to France because he didn't believe in the war, but but the British held him as a spy. So he was imprisoned. He finally did return to France, and he remained there until 1793, and he served as a French consul. When he returned in 1793, he served as French consul to New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And when he returned in 1793, he discovered that in his absence, his farm had been attacked, his wife was dead, and his children were living with complete strangers. He just left, and he left his family there in New York, in Orange County, and they were attacked and killed. And he was considered a great diplomat and was named an honorary citizen of several American cities. When living on his farm in Pine Hill, he wrote a series of essays about America based on his travels and experiences as a farmer. And his most famous piece is Letters from an American Farmer. And why this is so famous and important is that, like Franklin, he's talking to the average man. And so he's describing what it is a farmer does. And so it's not the colonists trying to define themselves as something new. It's more that they were trying to make sense of. Let me start again. It's Letters from American Farmer is important because it's about the average American, what the average American farmer does, how he lives his life in America. And this was especially popular with European readers because they're trying to find out who this new American is. What are their values? What are their beliefs? What are they doing? Why are they doing what it is that they're doing? Why do they believe what it is that they believe? And so de Crevecoeur does a lot to kind of help shape American values. It's important when reading it to remember that even though it sounds like it's nonfiction, it is fiction. And throughout the letters, de Crevecoeur uses the character of James to describe how social principles laid out by the new American society operate in the life of an individual American. So you can see why this would be particularly interesting to Europeans who this concept of individualism, of liberty and justice and democracy is really a new idea. Some themes you'll find in the letters: the nature of the American character, i.e. our work ethic, the responsibility of the individual, that you have an individual responsibility to help others, to take care of yourself and the people around you. Anti-intellectualism, which was seen as what the Europeans were. So it's sort of a response to European philosophy and beliefs. The farmer is presented as the prototype of American character. The treatment of slaves, you'll see how he talks about that. And the view of immigrants and their ethnicity. Again, that there is this new combination of person that is no longer simply French or simply English or German or Dutch, that we become this melting pot. So you see all of these themes in his letters. So how did the Age of Reason impact Americans? Well, German philosopher Immanuel Kant defined enlightenment as the liberation of man from his self-caused state of minority. Minority is the incapacity of using one's understanding without the direction of another. So think of this as being having a minister tell you what the right thing is to do without you using your own logic and reason to figure out what the right thing is to do, okay? So that's the idea of minority. So this is a liberation from having religious leaders tell Americans how they're supposed to live. Then he goes on to say, the state of minority is self-caused when its source lies not in the lack of understanding, but in a lack of determination to use it without the assistance of another. So in other words, you need to use your own logic and reason to decide what is the right thing to do. Okay? So what connections can you make with these authors' values and contemporary American values? In what ways are our values changing today? Certainly our values are in some ways very similar and in some ways very different. So I want you to be thinking about this, because again, this is an important concept of understanding the other, because we have created this whole new other. With the creation of America now, we've got this melting pot of otherness, because people come from completely different lineages now than they had before in the past. So we've got this whole new idea of difference. We've got the slaves as other, we've got the Native Americans as other, and we've got Americans as other. We have the Europeans as other. So we've got this whole kind of world of otherness now in play and shaping our identity. So that's it for today's lecture. If you have questions, feedback, comments, by all means, place them in the questions and comment forum, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.